Hello and welcome to another video from me, Rough Swordsman, Wargamer. It's an open the box and it's an unboxing of Vuca Simulations' brand new game, Traces of War, designed by Tetsuya Nakamura. And this name will be familiar to you if you have Vuca Simulations' other game, The Great Crisis of Frederick II. So, what's all this about? Traces of War is a two-player game that simulates the intense fighting between Axis and Soviet forces in Ukraine after the Battle of Kursk from August 1943 to March 1944. A major Soviet offensive is launched against a German mobile defense. Will the breakthrough be successful? Game contents: there are two 20.7 x 28 inch, which is 525 by 712 millimeter maps, 303 5/8 of an inch and 18 3/4 of an inch round counters. I think that possibly means rounded counters. Two sets of player aid sheets, one solitaire track sheet, one rulebook, and one 6-sided die. So seeing it's got a solitaire track sheet, much like some of Vuca's other games, tells me that this is very solitaire friendly. And yes, moving down to the game meter here, we can see the complexity is only a 4 out of 9, but the solitaire suitability is a whacking 9 out of 9. So the game features unit scale divisions for Axis and cores for Soviets. Timescale 1 turn equals 1 month. Map scale about 20 kilometers per hex. Playing time 3 to 6 hours and players 1 or 2. Designer, as we've just mentioned, Tetsuya Nakamura. Developers Patrick Gebhardt and Leonard Lindbach. Art director Patrick Gebhardt. Graphic artist Pablo Berserk. Special contributors Edgar Gallego and Hans Korting. Here we can see a little bit of the map and some of the counters. And its age is 14 plus. Right, let's get the shrink wrap off. The shrink wrap is off. And as per normal, a sort of textured finish to the box. And a thinner box than normal, about 1.5 inches. Which seems to suggest to me that it hasn't got the mounted maps for a change. But let's have a look. Let's open the box. There we are. There's the rule book. So let's have a look at that. The rules, full colour of course, glossy-ish type paper, and come in at 15 pages. So not much there at all. So, table of contents, components, how to read the components. So, usual sort of thing, the amount of steps, unit ID, combat strength and movement allowance. So, nothing surprising there. And I stand corrected. They are round counters. So, headquarters in this game. Yeah, only stack 1 HQ. They can be relocated. So this is their command range. Again, players of war games will be familiar with that. Not sure what this number is. And it looks like we may have HE and armor piercing values there. So these are command chits for the Soviets and for the Axis HQs. We can see their supply chits, Soviet reinforcement chits and Soviet airborne chits as well. And an OKH chit and Stavka chit for the Soviets. Various other markers, how to prepare for play. The player aid sheets, which we'll have a look at in a moment. So, terrain effects chart, combat results table, all very standard. Luftwaffe reorganization table, negotiation table. NP costs table, that's negotiation points, and tables for both the OKH and Stavka chits. Sequence of play, spelled out here, starts with a Luftwaffe reorganisation phase, command chit selection phase, and then the action phase. Turn end phase with victory determination, and turn advance. And then these sequences are split up and given more detail. So it looks like the Luftwaffe reorganisation phase determines how many Luftwaffe markers are available. Command chit selection phase looks like the Soviets select 6 every turn. An example of that here. And the Axis chit selection. And what they can pick is indicated on the turn track. So this, I suspect, makes it very solitaire friendly. And here we've got an overview of the different actions that happen depending on what chit you draw. And then the turn end phase and advance turn phase. Stacking seems to be pretty standard. I think it's 2 combat units and an HQ if you wish. Zones of control looks pretty standard. Although Zocs in this game extend across major river hacksides, which I think is not the norm, is it? And they affect supply, movement, retreat, and reinforcement placements. Command range is not impacted by Zocs. But about the Luftwaffe air support and supply. So if you draw this chit, you've got to check your supply status. Supply lines and all that sort of thing. Movement, 2 types is there, normal movement and strategic movement. And the strategic looks like if moving onto roads and that sort of thing. Zoc effects on movement, entering or leaving an enemy Zoc costs extra movement points, voluntary relocation of your HQ if things get a bit hairy. Combat. Combine the attack strengths and any other participating units, then work out the defense strength, and then a ratio with things like shifts. I think it's ratio shifts. And the results. We'll be looking at the combat result table in a minute. And penalties, of course, if you exceed stacking limits, if you have to retreat. Advance after combat. Again, all pretty standard. So this looks like it may well be a good hex and counter game for someone that's either not played one before or is still a sort of new player to war games. Combat example. Reinforcements. Here are the chits for those. And the difference between the 2 types of reinforcements for the Soviets and the Axis. And this is to do with, for the Soviets, with this number in the corner. It's not a game turn. So you have to keep count of how many times the reinforcement chit is drawn for the Soviets. So this one will come in the first time you draw it. You'll have to wait for 6 times drawing that chit for that reinforcement to come in. Reinforcement by airborne chits. The Axis, it looks like when they draw their OKH chit, they can then spend negotiation points to receive certain amount of those types of reinforcements. That's interesting. And then we've got some special rules, victory conditions, and optional rules. And that, I think, is it. And then we've got historical notes, a little bit about von Manstein there. And that is it. Them's the rules. Not 1, but 2 D6 dice. This, I believe, is the solitaire track sheet, and it's mounted. 2 map sheets, which we'll have a look at in a moment. And then there are 3 counter sheets. Here's the first sheet, and these counters are similar to all the Vuca Simulation games in that they are pre-rounded, easy to punch, and have a nice linen finish on them. These down here are the back, if you like, of the command chits, and these are Supreme Command order markers, which tell the Axis that they must hold that city at all costs. Here's the other side, reduced side, showing this line across the middle, and there we are. There's those chits. Here's sheet number 2, showing mainly the Germans, and once again some more of those command chits. And the other side. And here's the last sheet, sheet 3, with supply counters. Here are the Luftwaffe counters, and looks like you might get column shifts. And here's a -2 DRM. And the other side. And then there are 2 sets of mounted player aids. Here's player aid sheet A, giving us the sequence of play. Turn 1 special rule, and a little bit of an explanation as to what goes on here. They're double-sided, so on the other side we have the combat results table, this negotiation points, Luftwaffe reorganisation and OKH command chit table. And as we saw in the rules, how much things cost for the Axis, for their reinforcements. The Stavka chit appearance table, telling you to always round fractions down. Breakthrough hex info, zones of control, and the terrain effects chart. Here's player aid sheet B. So we've got summaries for supply, movement, and combat. And on the other side, info about reinforcements, Luftwaffe air support, crossing points, those counters we saw, how to relocate your HQ, little reminder about the optional rules and what the units mean. Okay, let's have a look at the maps. Here are the 2 maps, and I can just about fit them on my table top to bottom. You can see the split here, and it's in this rather attractive, I suppose, sort of pastel-y colour, would you call it? And we'll have a close-up because you can just about see one up here. We've got the Soviet tracks over here, and the place names are in normal alphabet for us, but also the Cyrillic alphabet. So very nice looking map. It reminds me of, and maybe that's what they're doing, reminds me of a sort of army map that the commander would have to pore over. I do like it. Right, let's have a close-up. And here's Kharkov, is it? And down the bottom right, here's the turn track. And these maps, I forgot to mention, are on the same sort of really high quality paper that their other game, 1914 Narc Paris, is on. But if you haven't got that game, it's also very similar to the, I believe it was the musket and pike maps, that sort of paper. Here's that track that was upside down, the reinforcement schedule per chit draw track. And on the bottom left of the map, we've got the German equivalent of their reinforcement schedule. So, them's the maps, and that's everything in the box. So this has been an Open the Box, an unboxing of Vuca Simulations' brand new game, Traces of War, designed by Tetsuya Nakamura. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, he's the designer of another published Vuca Simulation game, The Great Crisis of Frederick II. But this game looks like it may well be an excellent entry-level game for people new to wargaming, especially hex and counter wargaming. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and you found it interesting. And if you did, and you haven't done so already, it would be great if you would consider subscribing. Really does help. Pushing the like button of the video helps as well. And of course, if you want to be informed of other content the channel uploads, then push the old bell. By all means, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Because as I always say, I love to read them. Thanks as always to my subscribers. Thank you so much. And as always, just before I go, a quick plug. If you wish to support the channel a little bit further, well, you can. You can buy the channel a coffee, and there's a link in the description for that. Or you can push the super thanks button. Either of which, if you decide to do that, gives you a big thank you from the channel, and it just helps to keep the channel ticking along. So yeah, thank you. Right then, hope you can join me for the next video. But until then, as always, you take care and goodbye.